Well, I want to start by doing something that everybody that teaches anybody anything about speaking says you should never do, okay? And that is to make an apology, okay? All right, I wasn't happy with the way everything went yesterday. It was such a, we said a lot of fun things, a lot of good things, and I was really excited to do it. But I made a bad mistake yesterday. I got asked to play golf by some people that I couldn't say no. And we went out at 12 o'clock noon, and I stayed out for 5 hours, and I did not enjoy it, and I was upset the whole time that, because I like to come in here really ready, really everything goes smooth, and I wasn't happy with me. And so I apologize to you for that. And I wondered why it was so hot in here last night. But I'm sure my core temperature was probably 100 degrees and I was burning up. So anyway, I apologize for that. And we can't go back over and plow all that and some of the stuff that I didn't do like I wanted to. And so I apologize for that. But the source materials are absolutely there. We're going to spend 5 or 6 minutes, because one of the things I did getting flustered and all that was I had the wrong clip on, okay, about protein synthesis. Okay, and we're going to stop and see it. It's just going to be short, and I've got it right this time, okay, because it is the absolute slam dunk, okay, evidence that there was intelligent design, okay, in the origin of life on this planet. It is not. There is no rational way looking at that evidence. We don't have time to see all the fun DVDs that are in our school library and are here also that have all the ooh and ah stuff in it. Okay, ooh and ah stuff is like looking at a particular woodpecker and the way he's made. Okay, or looking at a giraffe and seeing why a giraffe doesn't get a stroke every time it puts its head down to get a drink, okay, and why it doesn't pass out every time it stands up, which it should. Okay, the ooh and ah stuff, like how does a whale, all right, dive to depths of a mile, stay down 20 minutes, and come right back up? In other words, all the genetic information that has to go into a whale being able to do that, okay, all by itself blows away, or is any kind of thought that that could have happened by accident. Especially when you consider that the simplest organisms, okay, are made of 400 proteins. Okay, the simplest ones are made of only 400. Okay, but that's a lot. Okay, considering that most of those proteins have 10 to 15 to 30 amino acids strung together and are made of 2,000 or 3,000 atoms, and they all have to be what? They have to be perfect. It's like that. What do you call when you type all that stuff up on that line? Is that a URL? Is that what that is? Hey, I got that. Okay. The URL. Okay, if you have a real long URL, it's got to be perfect. Okay? Well, all right, that message is really more important than any other message you could ever pose to somebody or explain to somebody. It is just slam dunk overwhelming. But I want us to look at 2 or 3 things tonight, because I was kind of supposed to cover these in the curriculum, okay? And these are some of the ooh-ah stuff that everybody wants people who are in apologetics to deal with. Like dinosaurs, like the flood, and like the age of the earth, okay? And we are going to look at those tonight, okay? I'm not an expert on any of those things. I'm not going to pretend to be, okay? As a matter of fact, I'm a jack-of-all-trades science teacher, okay? All my career I've taught 7th grade life science, 8th grade earth science, 9th grade physical science, 10th grade biology, then chemistry, then physics. For you teachers, I had 6 preps a day for 22 years, okay? So I've got a good general knowledge, okay, of science principles, but I'm not an expert on any one of them, okay? And I certainly am not in astronomy at all. But All right, the principles of science are something that are very deep within me. So, okay, before we look at a little bit at dinosaurs, and a little bit at the age of the earth, and a little bit of the flood, all right, I wanted us to remind ourselves that science truth and God's truth, when both of them are correctly interpreted, they will not disagree, and we do not have to fear them. And we don't need to stick our feet in the mud or in the ground, okay, and stand for things that don't make sense because we're in a position where we can't quite make them fit. Whenever I get to a place where I currently can't make them fit, I just tell myself what? I don't got this figured out yet. Okay, I just haven't gotten to the bottom of it. Okay, and I may never get to the bottom of it, but that won't change what? That won't change the truth that they work. So, all right, one of the things science reminds us of, all right, is the very fact that we can figure out, okay, a rational universe created by a rational God. All right, going back to Einstein's quote, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is what? Is that it's comprehensible. Do you know that the official position of Christianity was, until 1500, you can't figure it out. It's a sin to try to figure it out. It's all a mystery. It's all magic, and God's the only one that has any business knowing anything about it. Right, that was the official position of Christendom. Every really smart guy, that's because girls and ladies weren't allowed to go to college or university, every smart guy that learned something new got in trouble with who? The church. He got shut up, he got shamed, he got beaten, he got burned at the stake, he got tortured until he would say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Okay? All right, but look at the potential in creation at the beginning when he made, Adam and Eve made mankind. He said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and rule over it. Now, what does that mean? That means what? Think about it. Figure it out. All right, how do I rule over a 1,200-pound cow that's fixing to have a calf and needs my help? In other words, how do I rule over her? All right, with my hands and feet? Why not? Because I'm no match for her. How do I dominate an elephant or a rhinoceros? I got to do it with what? I've got to do it with my mind. The last 3 or 4 weeks I've read two great books, one about John Adams and the other about George Washington. And we kind of think of the late 18th century as this kind of romantic, wonderful, good old days time. It was a terrible time. You know, both of them lost half of their children to diseases, terrible diseases where they sat there and hopelessly watched their children die, knowing they were going to die. Okay? All right, what have we done about that with our minds? All right, we've said that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable. All right, we live in a sin-damaged world, okay, with consequences of sin all around us that are not our personal fault. God gave us the intellect and even told us to go out and do marvelous things, do great things, enjoy my creation. And okay, the only way we can do that is because it can be figured out. And the only reason we can figure it out is because it was ordered to begin with. So look at the next verse. Boy, and this one is Watson and Crick DNA Okay, mitosis, meiosis, right in the book of Psalms. Okay, this is one of David's. For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance. All right, David had no certain knowledge, okay, about anything past that we did figure out pretty quick, okay, that there was something to do with sex. Okay, we pretty well figured out, okay, that in mating something happened, and we figured out pretty quick it had something to do with semen, right? Okay, early in the Bible, it's plainly talked about. Everybody figured out that if men and women don't get together, and somehow or another semen is not involved, then there aren't any babies. Okay, other than that, okay, what was pregnancy to them? It was kind of a mystery. It was less of a mystery to women. Why? Why, ladies? Because after the 5th month, what'd you feel? You felt kicking, and you felt elbows, and you felt knees, and it was different. But David is alluding to the fact that even he had no clue what was in that semen, that there were billions of sperm cells, and he had no clue that it only took what? One of them to make the journey and find the egg and penetrate it and start this amazing miracle. Okay? Look at the next one. Let's do one more, and there's lots of them. All right, we've alluded to this a couple of times. This is an allusion to the incredible, intelligent power he has given us up here. You know, this is about the Tower of Babel. Okay, when they had already taken off, I read in chapter 5, Dale dealt with this 6 to 8 months ago. All right, it lists the genealogy, and very quickly, what did they figure out how to do in those genealogies? Okay, Tubal-Cain was the father of those who invented what? Okay, I think it was instruments. Somebody else figured out what? Iron. They left the Stone Age. Somebody else figured out this. Or the old notion, okay, the old evolutionary notion that the early men were stupid people that could just grunt and talk is totally false. Okay? And it wasn't just in one place. All around the world at this time, people were already doing differential calculus. They were doing geometry. Somebody finally figured out zero and added that. The pyramids, the Hanging Gardens, stuff was going on in China 2,000 and 3,000 and 4,000 years before Christ, which is right at the beginning of creation. Okay, our tremendous minds, okay, we were not primitive, stupid people. We were brilliant from the beginning. Okay, right? And we looked at things from the beginning and said, we can do things better. We can make improvements, okay? So I want you to keep those verses in mind, because the sad thing is, the story of the Tower of Babel was, we got so smart, we thought what? We thought we were smart as God, or we didn't need God. Now, there's a very famous passage in Job 38. Okay, this is right after the young man, Elihu, speaks up after the 3 friends have given all kinds of false arguments to try to, explain what's going on. And at the end of 37, Job gets really arrogant and says, hey, I'm a perfect guy. I don't deserve any of this. And I've got a lot of questions for God. All right, how does God deal with Job's smart aleck attitude? He starts asking what? He starts asking questions. And for the next 2 chapters, okay, now this is interesting. The next 2 chapters, read these when you go home tonight. He starts asking them questions about weather. He starts asking them questions about oceans. He starts asking them questions about wildlife. All right, those questions that he asked Job at that early date, what answers did Job have? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And then he quit saying, I don't know. And then he just sat there and started crawling deeper and deeper into his hole. It's really sad, okay? It's really sad that almost every time we get really accomplished, we take the credit away from who? Carol's not here tonight, but this is okay. I can tell this one. You don't have to go tell me. When she got the diagnosis that she had a tumor, okay, in the very center of her brain, okay, on her pituitary, of course we were terrified. You know, we didn't know what it was. We just saw the shadow of it, and we came out after the MRI and all that kind of stuff. And so I asked, who should we go to? And they say, well, the best guy in the country, the world's right here in Lubbock. Okay, you need to go to him. So that's good enough for us. We'll go there. So we go in, and he talks to us, and he says, here's what we're going to do, and here's what we need to do. He's got to have surgery. She's going to take it out through her nose and go in there and take this, terrifies us to death. And of course, then we got to worry whether it's, whether it's malignant or not. Okay, well, in the course of the conversation, it comes out that we're Christians, and we're going to be okay with this, and we've got a wonderful church family, and we've got a physical family that's all Christians, and we're going to get through this one way or another, and the Lord's going to help us through. And this guy, bless his heart, I'm still praying for him. He said, he told me, he says, I'll get her through this. All right, he said, God won't have anything to do with it. That's what he said. He said, I'm the best there is. He said, I got the best hands. He said, I got the best crew. I got the latest technology. He said, if anybody can save you if it's malignant or take it out, if it's not, I'm the guy who can do it. He said, you better be confident in that. That's what you better worry about. Now that was it's kind of tough to listen to, but I didn't want to make you mad because he's going to work on it. But that's in contrast to a lot of great surgeons I know, who give the credit to God for what they can do with amazing skills that they've developed, which they didn't get free, they didn't get dumped on them, they've worked at them. But God knows he has to humble Job, and I think it's a great verse for us, okay, to keep in mind. And at the end of, he dresses Job down, he goes lower and lower and lower, and then he says, will the fault finder contend with the Almighty? Let him who reproves God answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am insignificant. What can I reply to you? I lay my hand on my mouth. Once I have spoken, I will not answer, even twice, and I will add nothing more. Well, now as we go on into this, as we talk tonight about good science versus pseudoscience, as it relates to some of these things, this passage is not a cop-out. This passage is not a cop-out. This is not an excuse, all right, for not trying to understand God's ways. Because I'll ask you this question. Are all of God's ways and all of God's character a mystery? Absolutely not. We do not worship a fantasy God. We do not worship a mystery God. He has shown himself. He has revealed himself in words. He's sent his Son here. God's character is not a mystery at all. But some of his ways are what? Some of them are, whew. Okay, one of them is eternity. It is. Okay, it just is. We are time-bound critters. Everything in our existence has a beginning and an end. And when God tells us there's no beginning and there's no end, I'm sorry. And if you say, well, God, I just don't understand that, so I'm not going to go there. All right, here is an underlying strength in this whole area of apologetics. We are not going to have an answer for everything. We don't have to have an answer for everything. We do not. That's not an excuse for being ignorant. Okay? That's not an excuse, for not having a rational answer for your faith. But none of us needs to carry the burden that I've got to have a good nail-it-down answer for every tough question. There are times when I can go to God and say, God, I don't get this, but I trust you. Okay? I may get it 2 years from now or 5 years from now or 10 years, but I may not ever get it, and that's okay. Because all of your ways that are critical to me are clear. All right. Now, let's differentiate between good science and pseudoscience. All right, God blesses good science as he blesses any of man's activities that honor him. I used to take my biology class when we studied communicable diseases to the little cemetery in our little farm town that was started in 1905 when the first homesteaders got there. And we go over and we look at the family plots. And there'll be a plot for mom and dad, and this, and then there'll be about 12 gravestones. And over half of them say, baby boy, no name, born January 10th, died February 6th. And then there'll be one a year later. Baby girl, born February 27th, died March 3rd. What did most of them die of? Flu, diphtheria, measles, mumps, things like that. Number one killer in the world, what is it? Anybody know what the number one killer of human beings is? Diarrhea. Dysentery, dehydration. Biggest death rate is up to 2 years old. That's the way it is in Africa, South America. All right, for most of us, and this is always a delicate thing, all right, we have 2 kids, we have 3 kids, we have 5 kids. We expect to what? We expect to raise every one of them. We expect to raise every one of them. If anything gets wrong with them, we take it, we get it fixed. They don't get all these diseases. Why not? We vaccinate them. We've got clean water. We just say, all right, so good science blesses man's activities that honor him. Okay? And we live in one of the most blessed places. Good science blesses a sin-damaged world. All right, there are lots of consequences in the world because of sin, that we personally don't deserve. Now we deserve some of what we get. Certain sins, they pay you back directly and fast. But there's generic effects of sin. Good science deals with a lot of that. In the areas of nutrition, medication, housing, travel, all kinds of ways. Good science is no threat to spiritual truth. A good science that is honest, is looking for truth, is going into what God has let us open up. No threat at all. Good science affirms the wisdom and faithfulness of God toward his creation. In other words, we find out more and more things that we didn't know about that are not natural. They are what? They are created. They are not natural, they are created. There aren't any natural things. Because nothing has happened by itself. It was all created. Now, one more on the next slide. When it comes to making an apology for a reasonable faith in God, good science does not ignore, deny, or ridicule any new valid truths. Now, I want to add a subscript to this. I want to listen carefully so you don't throw me out of the church. I teach my own kids and I teach my kids at school to put an asterisk by everything you currently believe to be true. Okay, what is the asterisk there for? It reminds me what? Okay, it reminds me, okay, all right, any truth can be questioned over and over and over again. That shouldn't scare us. Okay, if I re-examine a truth and it's still true to me, what do? I hang on to it. If I re-examine it and I say, wow, how did I ever come to that conclusion? Then what do? I change it. All right, putting the asterisk there, does it mean there's no such thing as real truth? That's not what it means. But it reminds me. Every time I sit down and study immersion, what we call baptism, for the remission of sins, it's fine to study it from a blank slate. Why? Truth's not going to change. Okay? And if you perceive it to be different, what does God want you to do? He wants you to change it. Now, that's pretty tricky sometimes. It's a very important moral question I have changed my mind on 4 times in my life. And here's where I am right now. What do I not know? What do I not know? Okay, if I've changed my mind 4 times, okay, I don't know if I'm on the right cycle right now. Okay, I don't know. I've talked to other men. I've got their opinions. I don't know if I'm holding the truth right now. But I am holding the truth in a good conscience. Why? Because I've changed my mind 4 times already. I've already changed my mind 4 times. But I've got an asterisk next to where I am right now. Why? Because I'm still thinking about it. And if Bill Koff comes over and gives me a pointer on this, and if he says something that I've never thought of before, I'm going to change my mind. I will. I'm going to change my mind. All right, now, all right, that's good. Okay, that's good science. Now, pseudoscience, and pseudo, of course, it just means fake, phony, imitation. Pseudoscience ignores the rules of good science. And good science is that scientific method that you learn, okay, the first week of every year of science from 7th to 12th grade, pretty much. Okay, you have a problem, you have a question, then you make a hypothesis, then you research the hypothesis, and then you do experimentation, and you observe, and you put down your data, and then you draw a conclusion, and then you publish it. Okay, that's scientific method. And if you're a good scientist and not a phony scientist, you let the evidence take you where? Wherever it goes. Wherever it goes, okay? And there's plenty of bad science going on. There truly is a lot of great science, obviously. Who was it that brought me up this great thing about, they now say that we're turning over our knowledge? Who showed me that? Was it every 12 hours or 12 days?
And soon it will be every 12 hours our knowledge will double.
Okay. All right, so we're accumulating a lot of great information, but it's got to be used fairly and honestly. Pseudoscience seeks to confirm an assumption or a prejudice, not test a hypothesis. This is a huge problem today. Okay, all right, it's a huge problem because we are now wrestling, okay, with things that we didn't used to wrestle with. All right, we used to absolutely believe that every living person had a soul. Okay, we used to believe that. Okay, it is the formal decision, okay, of many democracies and other places that you don't have a soul. All right, now that changes the way you do science. Okay, all right, especially if you're not committed to good, honest scientists. All right, if you start out doing science, all right, and you've already decided how you want it to come out. Okay, I know Larry did a very unusual PhD dissertation on badminton for the blind. Is that correct? Right? All right, he had to have a goal, a problem. He had to have a hypothesis. And then he did his experimentation, and he hoped it would come out a certain way. But as a good scientist, what did he have to do? He had to put down what really happened. How many misses, how many hits, what worked, what didn't work. Pseudoscience seeks to confirm an assumption or prejudice, not test a hypothesis. Pseudoscience withholds or falsifies evidence to confirm an assumption or a prejudice. One of my favorite thriller type movies is Fugitive. What was the bad thing that caused the whole problem with the other doctor in The Fugitive? Remember what he did?
Falsifying tests.
Absolutely. He falsified test information on a drug. I think it was a heart drug. Everybody that takes medicine is absolutely counting on what? That the science that went into it was good science. Okay, now does that mean there's never going to be a problem? No, we all see all the ads on TV every time it changes channels that you can sue anybody for any drug. Some of them have been used for years. They weren't perfect. But pseudoscience withholds or falsifies evidence to confirm an assumption or a prejudice. All right, that's not the way to do science. It has done a lot of harm in the world. Now, what are the reasons? Why would people do that? Pseudoscience will seek to ridicule or discredit good science for its own purposes. These can be financial gain, prestige, fame, influence, or politics, and I left off one. What's one of the big ones? Okay, does worldview affect the way people view science and do science now? A lot. Okay, all right, one of the biggest we've all seen is there aren't any sins anymore. They're what?
Illnesses.
They're illnesses. They're illnesses. Okay, now that's absolutely tied to their view of science. Okay, and they justify it. Okay, they justify it for these other reasons. Now, no, that's not next. All right, before we go on. All right, having put that, fresh in your mind, all right, I found the clip that is the one that I wanted you to see. Oh, come on. Just a second here. I'm going to do this the first time. Now I hit OK. Oh, I'm going to have to fast forward it just a little. I'm sorry. It's going to be all right. I get it to come down. Got a real delay on it. Now, if I start it and put it on slow. All right, now, our second will turn out the lights. I'm going to show you just about the 7 or 8 minutes that shows you, absolutely accurately how a protein is assembled. We're going to let that go, and I'll come back in a second. Now remember, we went over our high school biology. Oh, I got it going too fast. Come on.
Yet despite the limitations of blind chance, origin of...
All right, just a minute. All right, we're going to just see what we're seeing here. Each one of these is going to be an amino acid. When you tie these together, what do you get? you get a protein. Now, how important is it that all the amino acids are in the right order? It's essential. It's like spelling a word. Okay? It's like spelling a word. Only these are not 5-letter words or 6-letter words or 11-letter words. These are words, that's the metaphor. These are words of dozens or hundreds of amino acids involving thousands of atoms and molecules. So it's not like misspelling a short word. This is a long word. Okay? And the whole word's got to be spelled right. All right, this is going to show you how in a cell these are actually tied together. Now, you see, if they were all just floating around here, they're all just floating around, and then I said, well, okay, eventually we're going to get this. We're going to get the protein. What would be your question? Okay, how do they get together? For a long time, we had no idea. Up until about 25, 35, 40 years ago, we had no idea how they got together. Okay, and evolutionists said what? Oh, it just happens. Okay, it just happens. There's a positive or negative charge on the end of a molecule, and it's kind of like regular inorganic chemistry, that if you put some cations and anions together in a liquid environment, they'll link up, and so you'll get, NaCl or CaCl2. It's just positive, negative. But a lot of evolutionists and a lot of microbiologists said that doesn't make sense. It doesn't just happen. Because remember we said nothing just happens. Everything is caused. Everything is energy flowing. So what this is going to show you, okay, in truly amazing, up-to-date, okay, accurate animation, exactly how one piece of a protein is made. It could be for hair, it could be for a blood chemical, okay, it could be for a lot of different things. Okay, I want you to see this, okay, and every once in a while they'll interject a little something. This is the most powerful thing I've ever seen, right, that absolutely dispels the notion, okay, that all of this information, okay, because remember, the simplest organisms, I said, have how many proteins? 400. What do we have? We have 100,000. There's 100,000 different proteins that's required to build me. Okay? 100,000 of them. And they've all got to be what? They've all got to be right. They don't all have to be perfect. I can get a bad one for a little finger. Why? Okay. How many of you remember the terrible tragedy in the 60s of the European and Canadian women who took diuretic and took thalidomide? The children were born with their hands, many of them sticking out of their shoulders, and their feet sticking out of their pelvises. Okay, the drug wiped out what? It wiped out the information that should have built a what? It should have built an arm. Why did the mother's body not, or the baby's body not build that arm? That thalidomide wiped out those plans. They wiped out those plans. I had a baby pig born once with no eyes. Wasn't magic, wasn't the devil. What happened? The plans for the eyes, what? They got messed up. So, I want you to see how truly amazing this is. This is not smoke and mirrors. This is not guesses. This has been worked out by microbiologists with electron microscopes. This is the way it works. And it absolutely puts to death the notion.
Life researchers continue their efforts to find a natural process that could have generated the first life.
The problem of biological origins has, for a very long time, I would say, has been a real deep interest.
We're still not quite there, but we're close. It's beautiful that this man, who was the guru of the whole thing, reversed course after 20 years and said, well, I had a good idea and I got a lot of acclaim and I wrote a lot of books and I made a lot of money, but I was wrong.
And it was a student that put him on the right.
Yep. Yep. Here we go.
Components of living cells. Kenyon wrote, life might have been biochemically predestined by the properties of attraction that exist between its chemical parts, particularly between amino acids in proteins.
At the time that biochemical predestination came out, I and my co-author were totally convinced that we had the scientific explanation for origins.
Kenyon proposed that the chemical properties of the amino acids caused them to be attracted to each other, forming the long chains that became the first proteins, the most important components in the living cell. And this meant that life was effectively inevitable, predestined by nothing more than chemistry.
Many scientists embraced Kenyon's, and over the next 20 years, biochemical...
All right, what he's saying is, suppose I had a whole bunch of magnets, and I put them in a bag, and I shook them up. All right, what would happen? All the little norths would go looking for what? For a south. And they would link up, and they might get together in bunches, they might get in lines. All right, that's what he said at first. He said when they had no explanation, well, it probably was just magnetic, or it was attraction between different parts of a molecule, and it's probably just an inorganic chance thing, and they just kind of linked up. They just fit. All right, go ahead.
Predestination became a best-selling text on the theory of chemical evolution. Yet 5 years after the book's publication, Kenyon quietly began to doubt the plausibility of his own theory.
It was during that whole period of time that my doubts about certain aspects of the evolutionary account became apparent. When coming into contact with a powerful counter-argument given to me by one of my students, and I could not refute that counter-argument.
Kenyon was challenged to explain how the first proteins could have been assembled without the help of genetic instructions. In living cells today, chains of amino acids are not formed directly by forces of attraction between their parts, the scenario Kenyon envisioned on the early Earth. Instead, another large molecule within the cell stores instructions for sequencing the amino acids in proteins. It is called DNA.
Initially, Kenyon believed that proteins could have formed directly from amino acids without any DNA assembly instructions. And that's why so many scientists were excited about his theory. But the more he and others learned about the properties of amino acids and proteins, the more he...
Why would scientists be excited about his theory? They were looking for an answer that said what? There's no intelligence. There's no God. Okay, so they're excited. Because they just float around and they just kind of hook together. How many of your kids ever played with those poppet things that had a round knot on one end and a little hole on the other, and they were yellow and all the colors of rainbow, and you strung them together, or poppet beads? Okay, he said that's how it works. They just fit together and they just pop together.
And to doubt that proteins could self-assemble without DNA.
In DNA, Kenyon encountered a molecule with a property he could not explain through natural processes. For locked securely within its double helix structure is a wealth of information in the form of precisely sequenced chemicals that scientists represent with the letters A, C, T, and G, or adenine, cytosine, thymine, and guanine. In a written language, information is communicated by a precise arrangement of letters. In the same way, the instructions necessary to assemble amino acids into proteins are conveyed by the sequences of chemicals arranged along...
Now, keep in mind, it takes 3 of those, okay, to pick up and go grab one specific amino acid. All right, no one of these triplet codes. It takes 3 of these. You can get a CGT, or it can be a GCT or whatever. All right, it'll only pick up one kind of amino acid. In a second, it's going to unfold, and those 3 things are going to go looking for an amino acid. But they're not looking for just any amino acid. You're looking
spine
for
of the
exactly
DNA.
the right one.
This chemical code has been called the language of life, and it is the most densely packed and elaborately detailed assembly of information in the known universe.
Like other scientists working on the origin of life, Kenyon realized he had 2 choices. Either he had to explain where these genetic assembly instructions came from, or he had to explain how proteins could have arisen directly from amino acids without DNA in the primordial oceans. And in the end, he realized he could do neither.
It's an enormous problem how you could get together in one tiny submicroscopic volume of the primitive ocean all of the hundreds of different molecular components you would need in order for a self-replicating cycle to be established. And so my doubts about whether amino acids could order themselves into meaningful biological sequences on their own without pre-existing genetic material being present just reached, I guess for me, the intellectual breaking point sometime near the end of the decade of the 70s.
As Kenyon reevaluated his theory, new biochemical discoveries further weakened his conviction that amino acids could have organized themselves into proteins.
The more I conducted my own studies, including a period of time at NASA Ames Research Center, the more it became apparent that there were multiple difficulties with the chemical evolution account. And further experimental work showed that amino acids do not have the ability to order themselves into any biologically meaningful sequences.
Faced with mounting difficulties in his own theory and a growing body of scientific data about the importance of DNA, Kenyon was forced to confront the absolute necessity of genetic information.
The more I thought about the enormous problem that all of us who worked on this field had neglected to address, the problem of the origin of genetic information itself, then I really had to reassess my whole position regarding origins.
For Dean Kenyon, a new question became the focus of his search for life's origin. What was the source of the biological information in DNA?
If one could get at the origin of the messages, the encoded messages within the living machinery, then you would really be on to something far more intellectually satisfying than this chemical evolution theory.
Yet Kenyon faced a narrowing set of options, for he realized that as with pure chance, natural selection was also limited in its creative power. By definition, natural selection could not have functioned before the existence of the first living cell, for it can only act upon organisms capable of replicating themselves, cells equipped with DNA that pass on their genetic changes to future generations.
Without DNA, there is no self-replication. But without self-replication, there is no natural selection. So you can't use natural selection to explain the origin of DNA without assuming the existence of the very thing you're trying to explain.
Natural selection, chance, and his own theory of self-organization had all failed to explain the origin of genetic information. Now Kenyon saw only one alternative.
We have not the slightest chance of a chemical evolutionary origin for even the simplest of cells. So the concept of the intelligent design of life was immensely attractive to me and made a great deal of sense, as it very closely matched the multiple discoveries in molecular biology.
In the years since Kenyon's rejection of chemical evolution, science has revealed the details of an entire system of information processing that bears the hallmarks of intelligent design. With computer animation, we can enter the cell to view this remarkable system at
All right, this next 5 minutes is a gift from God. This is a gift from God for you to see. Okay, you can actually see what is happening right now in your hair follicles that is assembling the protein that is pushing your hair up out through your skin. It's happening there. It's happening as it's replacing your epidermal cells that are all replaced every 6 weeks. It's repairing damage. It's growing little kids. This is the process that does it right here. And right now we know for certain this is how it works, and then it's controlled by an intelligent alphabet of information.
After entering the heart of the cell, we see the tightly wound strands of DNA, storehouses for the instructions necessary to build every protein in an organism. In a process known as transcription, a molecular machine first unwinds a section of the DNA helix to expose the genetic instruction.
That big fat thing is a machine. Okay, it's just drawn in as kind of a purple thing, but it's got moving parts. Some of them have electric motors in them. I'm not talking about kind of an electric motor. It is an electric motor. It's got a stator. It's got all the parts of an electric motor, and it spins, and it uses electricity, and it pumps, and it moves things. We're not even talking about that little creepy thing that's swimming around there. All right, that itself is made of a whole bunch of proteins, and it's an electric motor in there that makes it go.
Needed to assemble a specific protein molecule. Another machine then copies these instructions to form a molecule known as messenger RNA.
Now that half piece has a code on it. It's going to go
When
looking
transcription is complete,
for amino
the
acids.
slender
Here it
RNA
goes.
strand carries the genetic information through the nuclear pore complex, the gatekeeper for traffic in and out of the cell nucleus. The messenger RNA strand is directed to a two-part molecular factory called a ribosome. After attaching itself securely, the process of translation begins. Inside the ribosome, a molecular assembly line builds a specifically sequenced chain of amino acids. These amino acids are transported from other parts of the...
Now the pieces down on the bottom are the amino acids. The little stuff on top is the information. That's where the code is. And it's picking those up. And these little pieces come along and grab them, and it starts to stick them together. And they're spelling the protein just like we would spell a word. If we gave a kid a whole box of alphabet letters, and we said, go spell encyclopedia, the kid would go with his little fingers, and he'd grab the E, and he'd put it there, and he'd put the N, and he'd put the C, and he'd spell encyclopedia. That's what's going on right now. And where it's getting all those is from the breakfast you ate and the lunch you ate, that your body took all the proteins and tore them apart into what? Amino acids. And intelligence runs the whole thing. Come on.
Cell, and then linked into chains often hundreds of units long. Their sequential arrangement determines the type of protein manufactured. When the chain is finished, it is moved from the ribosome to a barrel-shaped machine that helps fold it into the precise shape critical to its function. After the chain is folded into a protein, it is then released and shepherded by another molecular machine to the exact location where it is needed.
This is absolutely mind-boggling to perceive at this scale of size such a finely tuned apparatus, a device that bears the marks of intelligent design and manufacture. And we have the details of an immensely complex molecular realm of genetic information processing. And it's exactly this new realm of
Okay, it's everlasting. Now, I wish we could just go on and go on, stuff like this. Now, lots of times people will say, well, I watched my baby born, and I just knew there had to be a God. Well, a baby being born is pretty cool. Okay, it's not as amazing, okay, as this when you look at this for the first time, because for years people said, well, the baby just grows in mama. You know, it just grows. No, it doesn't. It gets built by this. It gets built from that very first cell, that first second, that sperm cell enters that egg, and 20 minutes later, it goes through mitosis. Now you got 2 eggs, or you got 2 cells, and they're identical. And then they 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and then you get a blastula, and then you get a gastrula, and then you get an embryo. That's how it works, and it's all controlled. And that universe is pretty cool. The planet, the privileged planet, you know, there's about 30 or 40 things that have to be perfect. There's a lot of neat things to look at. But the presence of DNA as the #1 source of information in the whole universe, okay, demands an intellect. It just does. And when you go from the simplest one, you know, you can look at like some of those little creepy things. How many of you in biology remember seeing some of those things? What was running around with the little hairs around the outside of it? That's paramecium, and those are cilia. Every one of those little cilia that swims got to have a what? It's got to have a motor. Every one of them's got a little motor. Some of them spin like this, some of them go this way. So, all right, I just wanted you to see that to go with what I didn't think I did well yesterday. Okay, you can see this, you can get, all right, I think every family ought to have this for sure. Okay, because it takes it through. All right, the last thing I'll say about both of these from Illustra, because this is too good a story not to know. All right, the one about planet Earth, okay, when it was made, a lot of scientists saw it and said, this is fabulous. We want it to open in the Smithsonian. That's a great idea. Let's have it open in the Smithsonian. It's one of the greatest science films ever about astronomy and the whole solar system. And guess what? The atheists went to court and got an injunction to stop it. Well, they're in court. And the judge, okay, the judge says, well, I don't know what all the fuss is. He says, why don't we just watch it? So they went and got it, and they showed it. It's an hour. They showed it in court. When it was through, the judge said, I don't see the problem with it. There's not a word in there about religion. There's nothing in there about deity. There's nothing in there about the Bible. I don't see what the problem is. The attorney gets up and said, Judge, the whole thing screams God. That's what the attorney for the other side said. And the judge what? Threw out the injunction, and he let him show it because it was honest science. And it wasn't his fault that it screamed God. It screamed God to anybody what? That was honest. And this does too. This does even more. This does even more. All right. We got about 15 minutes. And so I wanted to talk about a couple other things. 2 terms that you absolutely should never leave an apologetics discussion or study with are these 2. Spontaneous generation versus biogenesis. Now this one is almost as crazy as the people who are the scientists who say that the universe is infinite. Okay, there are some that still claim that it's infinite, in spite of what law? Law of conservation of matter and energy, equal mc squared. That's a law. Everybody teaches. They have to teach it in physics, teach it in chemistry, teach it in everything. And yet, pseudoscientists say, okay, that's always been true, but we still think the universe what? Started itself, created itself. Now, you have the right to be illogical. You don't have the right to be illogical and say it is logical. Well, this is the same way. Which one of these two do you think, okay, is the current prevailing dogma and law of modern science, modern biology? Which one do you think is the one that's in the books? Biogenesis, which says life only what? Only comes from life. That's what's taught in every single university, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, I don't care where it's taught. That is what's taught as scientific fact and law. This is the one that was taught in sciences and universities until 1865. It did not die until 1865. This one says life only comes from life. All right, what's the only other option? Life comes from non-living sources. That's what was taught at Cambridge and Oxford and the Sorbonne and everywhere, and in the Yale and Harvard up through the 1700s, because they thought, well, if you put enough of the right stuff together and everything turns out just right, life just, poof, starts. No. And it was, and yet, even though this is the current prevailing scientific law of modern biology, they go back to the beginning and say life started how? Spontaneously. Now, does that make sense? It does not. It does not. We still have no clue what life is. There have been lots of different guesses. Back in the Middle Ages, all right, they were pretty sure it was tied to oxygen. Oxygen was called what? Active principle. It's kind of a word for magic, okay? They kind of thought, well, oxygen is where life comes from. But all right, look at the illogic. The illogic again. From the age of faith, we maintained an impossibility, that life could come from non-living sources. And many of you remember it was a famous experiment of Pasteur with a special kind of glass bottle. Remember it? Had the swan neck flags. Because they, all right, for centuries they said if you leave milk out, or you leave water out, or you leave wine out, and come back in a few weeks and look at it under a microscope, what will you see? You'll see all kinds of creepy colors. You'll see bacteria. You'll see paramecia. You'll see all kinds of things. And you'll say, they just what? Spontaneously generated. Well, Pasteur had to prove that nothing spontaneously generates. All the glasses they used and all the jars they used were open to the air, and what happened? Got contaminated, and life sprung up, but it was not spontaneous. Now, with that in mind, let me see, get back where we were. Will this do it? Yes. Now, as you look at these three, I didn't do very good. I got 8 minutes left. That's terrible. But we did the really important stuff, I think. Oh, wait, I haven't helped y'all out yet, have I? I got to go to computer. That should do it. Do I have to point it up there? All right, okay. Now, when it comes to the things that are kind of the cool things to talk about in apologetics, one of the biggest things to keep in mind that in order to make sense of this, both sides of the truth have to be right. Now, one of the difficulties, okay, with all of these is how much really empirical evidence do we have about, okay, each one of those three? How much written down, measurable information do we have? As a matter of fact, which do we have the most about? Dinosaurs, actually. Which is certainly a statement about how silly it was for us to go through a period of time when Christians said what? They aren't real. Okay, that was really a bad step. That caused a lot of laughing and a lot of ridicule that we deserved. Okay? All right, talking about their existence. Now, people that are honest will tell you that we don't know a whole lot about them. You know the biggest argument going on today in the dinosaur community is? Which is a pretty basic argument. They can't even decide whether they are warm or cold-blooded. Now, when I was in school, you older folks, we were all told clearly they were what? They're cold-blooded. They were reptiles. They were reptiles. But serious paleontologists that have worked on these lots, they're having a real argument about which is which. Young Earth, old Earth. All right, again, how much really nailed down empirical evidence is there about the age of the Earth? There's not much. All depends on whose book you read. And the general rule is the more notoriety you want, you set the age as what? Older. Older and older and older. And you pull these numbers out. Now, all right, Noah's flood. All right, what are the biggest questions, okay, even legitimate questions that we have about Noah's flood? What now? All right, was it worldwide, or was it the known world, or was it local, just where people were? Okay, all right, is the Bible specific in detail about everything about the flood? It's really not. What are some of the questions you have about 366 days, 300, maybe it was 76 days in the ark? Got any questions about that? What are some of them? Okay, what did they eat during that whole time? What else? Has anybody here ever mucked stalls? You know what mucked stalls means? What is that? That's when you shovel manure out from a horse stall that has had hay in it. It has to be done when? Every day. Okay? All right, now we have to be careful. All right, we have to be careful. These are also, particularly this one and this one. These are the most difficult ones. All right, the difficulty with that one, of course, is that people will say, well, you're basing your whole thing on the miraculous intervention of God. In other words, if you believe in Noah's flood, it's the same as believing in the man in John 9 being healed of being blind. Blind his whole life, now he can see. All right, is there a scientific explanation for that? There is not. There is not. Now, if somebody can't see today and he comes back a week from now and he sees perfectly, is there an explanation for that? Cataract surgery, perhaps, could be something else. Okay. All right, Noah's flood, all right, is usually put into that category by unbelievers or by scoffers. It's going to be tougher now. Why? Why is it going to be tougher to blow off Noah's Ark?
We're finding more and more evidence of some kind of worldwide episode.
Okay, the flood is one side we're going to look at, but what's another reason it's going to be harder to argue against Noah's Ark?
St. Helens.
I'm going there in the next year.
Well, that building's from St. Helens.
Where's that place?
It's in Cincinnati.
It's in Cincinnati. Has anybody got plans to go? All right, there is a full-size, built, open for business ark now. Built to scale. Built to scale. All right, while they did it, all kinds of engineers were involved, okay? And they certified that it could have been built with hand tools in 88 years. How long did it take? It took 100. And for 150 years at least, the whole concept has been ridiculed. Space for the animals, food for the animals. All right, these people have spent hundreds of millions of dollars, all right, and they've shown, okay, that it's not a fantasy. Now, you still got to have some faith. There's got to be other things to come into it. But, all right, the key thing is for us is that we don't get trapped up in pseudo-truth because we think the end justifies the means. We do not have to do that. We do not have to find the ark. We're not going to find the ark. Okay, all of you older people, how many times has the ark been found in our lifetime? A lot of time. What happened to the ark in the next 2 to 5 years? Undoubtedly.
Probably rotted away. Rotted.
Same thing happened to the surface of the pyramids, which was all polished limestone. No. Where'd it go? It was stolen and used for what? Swimming pools, patios, houses, kitchen floors. It was all stolen. You think, all right, think about, okay, all right, the logistics. How many of you like to do a little bit of carpentry work? It's like me to hand you a pine pole, 3.5, 4 inches wide, round, and give you a draw knife and say what? Make me a 2x4. Make me a 2x4. How long would that take? I know. I guarantee you, Joseph and Jesus were ripped. They were ripped because a carpenter sat most of the day on a bench with a draw knife and reached out there and took a chunk and slid off a slice. The trouble with the ark is it wasn't built out of 2x4s. What it had to be built out of? Beams, planks, huge ones, all done by hand. Well, people said that's impossible. All right, our burden is never been with God proof beyond a shadow of a doubt. What's been our key word these 5 classes? A reasonable doubt. All right, God makes the most important things that we are asked to believe reasonable. Okay? We will never do away with faith or trust, but He never asks us to believe wild, fantasy, okay, ridiculous, absurd things. All of them are built on evidences. The same way that we live our lives, we spent on that first day. How many people live by faith in the world? Everybody. Is your faith always rewarded? Nope. As far as I know at this moment, I am in perfect health. I've never taken a prescription. I don't have any ailments. Doc has taken off about 3 little basal skin cancers on me, which are not real serious, right? They're not real bad, okay? Okay, but at the moment, I think I'm in perfect health. Do I know it? Nope. But I'm going to go ahead and live tomorrow normally. Why? Because that's reasonable. That's reasonable. That's all God asks for us. All right, God says, if I put out enough information that it's reasonable, I expect you to believe me. I expect you to trust me. And, okay, just want you to know, we do not have to be backed into a corner. We are not the irrational ones. We are not illogical. We do have faith. Okay, Many things are going to become sight. It's absolutely true. Something's going to become sight. But there is too much out there for us to have any nervousness or to be the least bit intimidated, okay, about saying that our faith is based on reason and a historical God who does real things with real people in real places. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed being with you. Sorry I tucked your legs off.